Hello, and welcome to today's Leading Practice webinar. I'm Paul Lombardi, the Vice President of Enterprise Standards here at Leading Practice, and I want to thank you all for joining us today, as well as make you aware of two different kinds of webinars we'll be hosting over the next couple of months. The first type of webinar is known as the Learning with the Leaders webinar, and it will cover actual case stories done by outperformers in the industry. The second type of webinar we'll be putting on is known as Thought Leader webinars, which will cover specific subject matter topics from thought leaders. Today we'll be having a Learning from the Leaders webinar, which focuses on a case story from SAL Heavy Lift on how to drive enterprise-wide transformation based on standards. SAL Heavy Lift, of course, is the world's leader carrier of specialized in sea transportation of heavy lift project cargo, and will demonstrate how they transform their organization by linking strategy, business models, and operating models. Attendees of today's webinar will learn how Leading Practice's reference content is being applied to link strategy and operation execution. They will explore the difference between performance and value drivers and how and where to use them, and finally discover how efficiency, effectiveness, and transformation can be realized in a matrix or siloed organization. Now, sharing his experiences today on the webinar will be Paul Okpurughre. He's the Head of Quality Management and Business Improvement at SAL Heavy Lift. Paul is a visionary senior business strategist with an outstanding history of success in organizational development, business transformation, and change management. He has had a successful track record of creating viable, actionable plans for change implementation with the goal of optimizing business productivity and efficiency. Paul has a proven track record of building companies to achieve process maturity as well as growth. He received his lead business architect certification just short 8 months ago and is the most recent recipient of Leading Practice's prestigious Modeler of the Year award. So with that said, Paul, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Paul, for the introduction, and welcome everyone to this webinar section. As already introduced, during this section I will present our transformation journey in SAL Heavy Lift and show how we apply Leading Practice reference content in our transformation path. Before I start, I will give a brief introduction of SAL Heavy Lift, what we do and the services we offer, and I will talk about some of the challenges that trigger the change and the transformation process. After that, then I will talk about how we apply Leading Practice reference content in our transformation. SAL Heavy Lift was a family-owned organization from 1980 to 2007. But from 2007 to 2011, K-Line Group bought SAL Heavy Lift. Transformation journey started 2012. In 2013, our business services start transforming not only to be semi-liner services, but to include project cargo, offshore projects, and others. I will talk briefly about the different service areas. K-Line operates a total of 561 vessels in the segment of container shipping, bulk shipping, energy transport, and other business areas which SAL belongs to. Looking at the services we offer in SAL Heavy Lift, we have three main service areas: the semi-liner service, the project cargo, and the offshore project. For the semi-liner service, it involves the transportation of specialized heavy cargo from one location to another. While the project cargo also includes transportation of cargo from one location to transportation of specialized cargo from one location to another, but also an extensive engineering work in the handling and the transportation of the cargo. While the offshore project includes transportation of specialized equipment for installation offshore, subsea installation offshore, and deep water installation offshore. Also the salvage, also in salvage operation as well. So what are the challenges we faced in SAL? I will mention some of them that are relevant for this presentation. When the transformation started around 2013, multiple strategic initiatives were introduced in SAL Heavy Lift, and these initiatives were running in silo. For example, we had our ERP project which was running in multiple departments, and also during this process we were transforming our business services to include project cargo and offshore. But there was no alignment within this project to see how the ERP project supports the transformation. So things were done in silo. There was no clear understanding of SAL business model from a strategic, tactical, and operational aspect. Looking at it, looking back, we can say most of our resources are centered around the operational aspect, allowing little or minimal resources for the strategic and tactical aspect of our business model. Roles and responsibility across the organization was an ongoing topic. There was lack of clear alignment within the different organization groups or functions within the organization. We're cutting across multiple organizations without clear roles and responsibility, accountability, and ownership. We had a knowledgeable organization which was built over the years, but our employees, our staffs were not supported by documentation. The knowledge was not supported by documentation. So we had experienced staff working in silo, working an ad hoc approach. Individual carries the experience, and this experience were not documented to allow knowledge transfer across the organization. Another challenge we faced was our perception of our uniqueness, which is very good. We perceive ourselves as very unique, but the understanding of what makes us unique across the organization was not a common knowledge, was not aligned across the different organizations. We also had growth challenges. Our revenue growth was minimal. At the same time, our costs were rising. So there was a need to look at the revenue and cost aspects. And of course, resistance to change, which was a major block for us as part of the transformation process. So we needed to address the resistance around the change process. So our approach, first of all, it was on top of our agenda to create a positive story around the change, to mobilize the organization towards the change, towards the transformation process, and to build a team that will drive the transformation process. After being able to achieve that, we are then able to apply leading practice reference content in the transformation process. Looking at how it started in November when we attended the business architecture training in New York. During the training, we learned how to apply leading practice reference content for our transformation need. Not only that, we also learn and see how other organizations apply the reference content to fit their organization need as well. That gave us a deeper insight on how to apply the reference content and how to tailor it to our need. So when we came back, we continued with the alignment process. And part of the first deliverable which was required by top management was to create a unified value chain view, create a business model with accountability view, and also specifying the business competence within the business model and our capabilities as well. With the business model, we're also tasked to look at our operating model in order for us to identify the transformation need, and also to identify the value drivers, performance driver within the business model. We did this with the support of leading practice coaching. So we had a strategy workshop where most of the alignment were done, and this was done with the support of leading practice. We couldn't do this on our own because it was we needed an expert in how to apply the reference content and how to facilitate the discussion. So that's why we sought out for leading practice support. But the team involved in this process include top management team, lead business architect, middle management, and change agents around the organization. I'll talk briefly about the different reference content we apply during this transformation process. First, we started by understanding the value drivers within our strategy, and also identifying the business model, identifying and mapping our business model. With the business model, we are able to identify our service flow, and within the service flow, we assessed our capabilities, looking at our core differentiating, core competitive, and non-core competence. And also, we identified the performance and cost opportunity and linked them to the value drivers, as well as decomposing the business unit into the operating model for us to be able to identify the transformation potential. Based on that, we also did a maturity assessment to really identify pain points and bottlenecks and link them to transformation. The end of the presentation, I will show how we were able to identify the assist situation and the to-be transformation. So let's take a look at how we apply leading practice reference content. We start with the value chain and business competency map. At the very beginning, the first task was to align the value driver to our strategy. This was done through the strategic workshop section, which was organized with top leadership. On this view, we applied leading practice reference management reference content to assess our business services. On the left side, you see the project cargo and the offshore project, while on the right side, you see the semi-liner service. By splitting this, we are able to identify the competencies, what part of our business are unique and what part of our business is non-core. And with that, we're able to identify the business modeling framework to apply within the different service areas. For the project, through this process, it was obvious for us that for the cargo, project cargo and offshore project, service model and performance model was the key aspect to focus on, while on the semi-liner service, cost and operating model was the focus. This actually created a good discussion point among our leadership team because our current strategy is mainly focused on cost cutting across the organization due to the current market situation. But this exposes the need for us to focus on other modeling disciplines such as the service model, performance model, and operating model. And in some other work we did, we also focused, of course, on the value models and also the revenue models. After applying the market assessment model, we then move on to map out our value chain. We map out simple classical value chain. Here you can see our management competencies, service area, primary competencies, and supporting competencies. So this is the main view of our value chain. With this, we were then able to map out our business model. So I'll move on to our business model. Looking at the business model, based on the value chain, we were able to map out our business model. This was one of the first tasks we did after we came back from the training in New York. So what we did was having a section with each department head responsible for the different organization area or organization group. So we identified the competencies, the functions within their organization group. So we look at it from the strategic aspect, the tactical aspect, and the operational aspect. And going through this process with each head of department, we were able to create a complete view of the different functions within the organization and within the organization group. This was the basis for our leadership strategy section, which was organized with top management. So as we can see here, we can see the different functions, and we can see that some of the functions are cut across multiple organization groups. This was very important for us to identify because it has direct relationships to roles and responsibility and accountability within our organization. Based on this view, we are then able to create an aligned view of our business model during the strategy workshop. So on the next slide, you will see the outcome of the strategy workshop, which was conducted with top management. So during this workshop, each executive that was present was given a copy of the business model for them to align, to classify, to see if we have all the different functions represented in the business model. So at the outcome of it, we got a much more aligned and defined business model with clear accountability linking to each organization area and organization group. So I'll take a slide back to see before the strategy workshop and after the strategy workshop. This was the first success we got out of this whole process, because at this view, we were able to define clear roles and responsibility across the different organization area and organization group. With the business model defined, mapped, and aligned across the different organization area, the next step for us was to identify what aspects of our organization are unique. So we made a capability assessment of the different functions across the organization. What we did was to identify what was core differentiating, what is core competitive, and what is non-core. As we all know from leading practice, 80% of the competencies within organization are non-core, 15% are core competitive, and it's only 5% that are core differentiating. So the question we raised within SAL Heavy Lift, what about the shipping industry? Because this figure you can see on the screen here is for general industry. So for the shipping industry, it looks like this. This was really interesting within our leadership, our leadership team, because we had a different perception of how unique we are in SAL. Prior to this exercise, there was a general understanding within the organization that 40% of what we do are unique. So we are unique in 40% of our competencies. But looking at this view, there's a wide contrast between that. But based on the strategy workshop that was conducted and the assessment of our capability that was done, this was the outcome of our competencies classification. We can see that SAL differentiates among competitors in 3% of our competencies, while the core competitive competencies are 16% and non-core lies 10%. This fits perfectly to the statistics which we all are used to from leading practice. So this really created a lot of discussion within our organization and gave us a true perspective of what aspect of our competencies are unique and what aspect of our competencies are non-core. Now I will present how we link value drivers to our business model. So based on the business model and the capability assessment, we were now able to link value drivers to the functions within the business model. By doing this, we got support from leading practice. So we applied the leading practice reference content, and with that, we are able to identify the value drivers for each function and link them to the functions within the business model. This was done through the strategy workshop, and I will show you the outcome of the result. From this view, from the left, we can see the organization area, the organization group, and we can see the functions within the organization area and organization group as defined in the business model. You can also see the competency classification showing what is core differentiating, what is core competitive, and what is non-core. We can also see the tiers at the strategic, tactical, or operational aspect. And based on the application of the reference content, we were able to specify what functions support our cost strategy. So we can link the key success factors that support our cost strategy to the function. Here we did the direct linkage, and we can see an overview of all the functions that supports our cost strategy. Same was done for growth and competitiveness. So we identify all the key success factors and link them to the functions that supports our growth and competitive strategies. So there is a direct linkage from the value driver to the business function and to the organization area. So we have a clear accountability view of what function, what group supports what strategy. On the next view, we can see operational excellence strategy. So All the functions that support our operational excellence strategy was also identified, and they were linked as well. Longer list, we have more functions within the operational excellence aspect. And this also reflects the 81% which are identified as the non-core competence within our organization. In addition to this, we also identify what functions, the functions that support our risk aspects, so our risk strategy as well. All this we achieved during the strategy workshop with our leadership team. But of course, being able to link the value drivers to the functions, to the business area and the business groups is one aspect. The next aspect was, how do we then measure performance? So the question came up, and we had to identify key performance indicators for the different organization functions. So how did we do this? We got support from leading practice. We applied the reference content, and we got support through some accelerators. So we added separate section with each organization group, the head of each department and their team, and we identified KPIs that are relevant for their areas and link them to the function. From this view is an example of our engineering KPIs. We were able to identify the KPIs applicable for engineering department. We agreed on the description, and we agreed on the formula for calculating the KPIs measurement. We also identified the expected goal for each KPI. This was done for each organization group within our organization, and we were then able to link performance to value driver, to the functions, and to the organization areas and groups. We were able to identify what departments, what groups supports the different strategic objectives. With that, I've talked about the challenges we faced, and I've also talked about our market assessment model, where we specify what business modeling discipline to apply within the different service area. I also talk about our value chain, and I talk about how we be able to map our business model, align the business model, and also assess the capability within the business model. I further went on to talk about how we're able to identify the different value drivers that relates to the different functions within the business model, and linking that to performance drivers. So now I will take a deep dive into our semi-liner business, our semi-liner and project business model, to see how we were able to create an operating model and also identify transformation needs within the business model. So taking a look at SAL Heavy Lift business model, we'll focus on the business model and see how we're able to identify transformation potential through the operating model and the service flow. So from the business model, we're able to extract the semi-line and project business model that looks like this. So from this point on in the presentation, I will focus on the semi-line and project business model. The first thing we did within the business model was to identify what activities are involved, or what functions that are involved whenever we get an inquiry from a customer for a shipping service till we prepare the final quotation and we deliver the cargo to the customer. So doing that, we identify the different activities, as you can see on the screen. Based on that, we're able to map out the flow, the connection of the activities from when the inquiry is made till the cargo or the quotation is made until the cargo is delivered. This is how it looks from the commercial side of view. So based on this, we're able to identify the service flow within our business model. By identifying the service flow within the business model, we were able to create the service flow diagram, as you can see here. We identified the organization area, so the process ownership within the service flow, and the roles involved in executing the processes. In addition to that, we also identify what tasks within the service flow are manually performed, where the information are generated and stored. And one of the pain points identified here was that information are stored in siloed location. So the informations are not centralized and are not accessible by all involved in the process flow. In addition to that, we were also able to identify the business objects that are created within the service flow and identify the storage location for the business object. Same as the information object, these informations are stored in silo, individual computers, and in multiple locations. This was the major pain points identified during the service flow mapping. So going back to our business model, we were able to then, through the process mapping, list out the different activities, as you can see on the right side, that are involved from when the customer make a request for a shipping service till we deliver the cargo to the customer. Not only did we map the processes involved in the service flow, we also applied different reference content within the leading practice reference model. So we were able to make a detailed mapping of our business model to identify revenue opportunities, value opportunities, cost opportunities, performance opportunities, and areas where we have integration opportunities. This took quite some time to achieve, but due to the collective effort from each organization area and organization group, we were able to specify the different opportunities that exist in the business model. From this view, you can see the summary of the different opportunities identified. So far in the presentation, we've talked about value chain, business model, the competence assessment within the business model, linking performance and value driver to the business model. I've also showed you our semi-line approach business model to see how we specify the service flow within the business model and being able to create a process model out of the service flow, and also being able to identify the different pain points within the service flow. Now I will take a deeper look at the business model decomposed into the operating model. There I will try to show how we were able to identify some transformation alignment potential within the operating model. I will take a specific example for demonstrating this. I will take a look at our tending process, because there we had some transformation alignment which I would like to present to you. Taking a look at the business model, under the sales function, we will now decompose the tendering handling function into the operating model. So let's take a closer look at the prepare and review code. There we will look at the processes involved in this, the process steps involved in this process. As you can see from this view, we map the process involved in the prepare and review bid, and it is very much centered around the key account manager. One of the lessons learned, or one of the things we identified during the mapping of the process, was that this process involves inputs from multiple other organization area and organization groups. And this was the outcome of the mapping. We could see that more processes are needed from engineering department, technical department, human resources, finance, and so. This process are key aspect to this process, and this were not involved previously before the process was mapped. Now we're able to identify that we have a gap within this process in the way we execute the process. And one of the pain points we have here was that when bids are prepared and after execution of the project, if we win the contract, there are cases where budget were overrun. That is, actual expenses versus what was budgeted for, there was a big variance. And tracing it back to the process, we observed that this pain points and this gap lies within this activity in the process. So we will take a deeper look at this process, especially the prepare bid part process, to see what actually happened within that process why we have the deviation in the budget versus the actual. We take in the tender handling process. On the left side, we will see the different activity steps involved in the process. So now we will go into the operating model and try to identify transformation needs within that process. So let's take a look at the operating model for tender handling process. On the left side, we can see the different process steps involved in that process. For us to specify the transformation need and the alignment potential, we'll assess the following aspects: the roles involved, processes and activities, the process owner, maturity, value and performance driver. We'll link it to this activity. We'll look at the pain points. We'll look at what initiatives we have out there to address the pain points, and we'll talk about what alignment potentials we have within this process step. As we mentioned in the process flow, the key account manager drives this process. And today, it's not always the case that the other functions which are identified here are involved in the process for creating the bid parts. And these roles are actual cost drivers in the process. Looking at the process view, the processes involved are very minimal. As of today, it's only the technical inquiry process that is involved in the process of mapping, or involved in the process of the bid preparation. But today, we identify that there are multiple other processes that need to be involved, and these processes the data analysis of these processes gives us an inside view of why our budget are not accurate enough and why we have the deviation compared to actual execution cost. We identify the process owner. Based on our assessment of the process, we are at maturity level 1, which means the processes are manually handled. They are performed in silo. As I mentioned in our service flow, information are stored in multiple locations and in silo location, which are not accessible centrally by all involved in the process. Same with the business objects. So this gives us that our maturity level here is level 1. The value driver, as I showed to you earlier in the presentation, where we identified the different value drivers and link them to the organization functions. Here through that activity, we are able to specify what value driver relates to these process steps. Same goes for the key performance indicator. This is one of the aspects that makes leading practice very unique, because we can see direct linkage between processes, performance driver, value driver, functions, and organization groups and area, and also see what strategic aspect do they actually support. So this is one of the unique aspects of applying leading practice reference content. Through the process mapping, we are able to identify the following pain points for this activity, for these process steps. One of the pain points we identify, of course, as mentioned, is that sub-process input and output are not defined within the process flow. We lack risk overview. We lack unified approach when we execute this process step, and we lack cost aspect from the different supporting processes to give us a true cost estimation. And of course, this can be linked to the fact that not all the processes are involved in the execution of the process step. We lack stakeholder transparency, and we lack measurement and goal set for this process step. We have multiple initiatives ongoing right now to address this. One of them is the implementation of an ERP system focusing on automating our tendering process, and also we have other initiatives looking at standardizing our templates and the different documents we apply in preparing the quotation. With the decomposition of the business model into the operating model, as shown in the presentation, And through the process mapping, we were able to specify and identify the transformation alignment potential within the operating model, with focus on the tender handling process. We've also done that for different functions within the business model, which I cannot show in this presentation. So looking at the decomposition, we were able to identify the following alignment potential. Integration opportunities. So when we prepare bid parts, there need to be integration in the way the task is performed across multiple organizations, and we need to standardize the way the bid parts are prepared, and also to standardize the process as well. Performance opportunity, which is obvious. Then we identify effectiveness and efficiency potential within the process, and setting clear measurements and goals for the process as well. In summary, we have a view that looks like this, where we have the assessment, we identify the value aspect, we are able to link the roles, the process to the business model, identify the accountability, we're able to assess the maturity, we're able to link the value driver and performance driver to the function and to the business model, and we're able to identify the pain points within the operating model. And finally, we're able to identify what alignment potentials we have within the operating model, focusing on the tender handling process. So applying the same method across the different functions within the service flow. So going back to the service flow again, we're able to apply the same method. So we did the same assessment, and we came out with an overview of pain points within the different functions in the business model. Here are some examples of the pain points we identified, and some of them I can't show the pain points because they're sensitive information within our organization, so I decided to take it out. And here we can see a clear overview of the pain points within the different functions in the business and operating model. And that is quite vital for us for the next step, because the next step was to now look at the maturity level within the service flow to see what maturity level do the different competencies have, and what competencies do we need to improve to be more mature. So we applied the maturity definition, as you can see on the screen. This is not new. We know, we've heard a lot about maturity level, but maturity level 1 means the initial stage where processes are very much in silo, while maturity level 2 is more repeatable, and maturity level 3 is defined, but there are rooms for improvement. So maturity 4 and 5, 4 is managed and 5 is optimized. So we will look through the service flow now and see how matured are the different competencies within the service flow. So we mapped that and made an assessment. We can see from this view that most of the competencies are very much siloed, which is they are very at the initial stage. And the gray activities are those competencies where there is not really, we couldn't really classify them. This was it's interesting to see, because it gives the true picture of how siloed the different competencies are within the service flow. So this is the as-is when we started. So through the application of leading practice reference content and through the transformation process, we are now able to move the maturity level, most of the competencies, to maturity level 3. And we did this through process mapping, alignment of the activity within the different competencies across the organization group, and having a defined way of how we should execute or how we should manage the competencies. Of course, this is not the end stop. Our goal is to move the maturity level most of them to maturity level 4, and some to maturity level 3. So we've tried to see what is the right maturity level for us to actually navigate, for us to deliver the services within the service flow. Where we're going, where we started, very low maturity. Now we're at the stage where most of the processes are defined. The next step is to say, how do we optimize the process to deliver the right output that supports the value driver and the performance drivers. So looking through applying the Unity reference content, we were able to map out the tendering process, looking at it from not only the process view, but also linking it to purpose and goals, applications, data, and governance, as well as performance measurement, to see how matured is the competence. On the top left, you can see where we started. On the top right, this is where we are. We've succeeded in moving the process maturity to 3, which means defined, but our goal is to get it to the maturity level seen on the bottom view of the Unity web. What we can see from this view is that we need to improve the maturity level of, for example, application. So these processes will be automated. So we are actually in the process of implementing sales and marketing CRM module. With that, we will be able to move the maturity level to where we want to be. Looking at the complete service flow, we have a consolidated view of where we started on the top left. On the top right, that is where we are. Then the middle web shows where we're going in terms of the maturity of the different competencies within the service flow. This is a very powerful tool to actually show the roadmap of how we can do transformation of certain aspects of our organization. And we are working very hard to get to where we want to be. Looking at the service flow combined, we can also have the same view. This is different from the slide you saw before because it's one combined view of the service flow. This view is very powerful because it gives a clear view of where we are, looking at the different aspects of the Unity web, not only the process view, but looking at the service, looking at the application, the performance aspect. And we are now able to see where should our focus be. On the top right, our processes are moved to level 3, but we still need to do some work on the aspect of measurement and applications and platforms. To sum it up, through the different modeling reference content, we're able to create a transformation map of our service flow. Here you can see the competence area from the left, then there's the business processes, the process steps based on the process model from the process mapping, and identify the process owner and the roles involved. And we were now able to identify through the mapping and also assessing the pain points and the maturity level. We are able to identify pain points within the different competencies and processes. And that enables us to define the transformation needs required to move the processes or the competencies within the service flow to the desired maturity level. So far on the right side, you can see the transformation we already made so far. It's centered around mapping processes, aligning it across the different organizational roles, identifying the ownership, and defining application need for us to be able to move the maturity level to the desired maturity, transform the different competencies to the desired maturity level. We still have some way to go, and at this stage we are in the initial stage of implementing a system to enable us achieve the maturity level as defined in the service flow. Yeah, this is a very good view for us to really track our progress, the transformation of our service, the competencies within our service flow. It really gives us a very one view of how how the transformation is going and how do we get there. I will sum up what we've talked about so far. So I've introduced to you how we were able to create an accountability view of our business model from the enterprise view to our commercial, semi-liner and project business model, and also be able to identify the service flow within the business model. And we went further to look into the service flow, looking at the pain points within the service flow. What pain points do we have within the different competencies in the service flow? And not only that, we were able to assess the maturity level and define the desired maturity level of the different competencies within the service flow and create a transformation roadmap, which we're actually working on right now. But the different dimension to all this is actually the linkage of the process to the value drivers and also to the performance aspect as well. And this is what we can see from this view. Here we can see the organization groups, the competencies within the organization group, same as in the service flow, what value drivers, the critical success factor relating to these competencies, and the processes. So we can actually drill down to what processes do we need to look at for us to be able to link the competence to the value driver, and also what is the performance expectation for the different processes within the competencies. So this is a very good view to show how to link performance indicator to process, to value drivers, and to organization groups and area. It's just an additional slide to the presentation. With this, we've come to the end of the presentation. But before we end it all, I would like to give you an insight of how we started this whole journey. It all started November last year when we attended the training in New York. During the training, we learned how to apply the reference content, the templates, models in modeling our organization. But one of the most important aspects of the learning process was seeing the different organizations that were represented during the training and see how they apply the templates and the reference contents in general in modeling the organization based on their organization needs. And this was very, very unique to see because the reference content can be applied across different organizations. It's so standardized that it can be applied across different organizations. And when we returned back to SAL Heavy Lift, we didn't really need to send everyone, all top management, all management to the training. But with the knowledge gained through the training and seeing how others apply the reference content, we are able to transfer that knowledge to our organization and start our transformation journey. So we are able to get a group of managers, top management, middle management, and some specialists within the organization in applying the reference content and modeling our organization so that we are able to identify our transformation need. Through this whole application, through applying leading practice, reference content, we were able to really differentiate our modeling principle, how we model our strategy through our value chain. So we were able to specify our value chain, specify the capabilities and competence within the value chain in form of our business model. And the business model serves the foundation, the baseline for us to apply the different modeling principles to identify our transformation need. So after mapping the business model, we are able to map the process model, look at service model, look at our performance model, look at our revenue model, and with the application of maturity reference content, we were able to specify what competencies or function within our organization to focus on relating to transformation or innovation. So this was really a powerful tool for us. When we combined the different models, looking at the maturity, we were able to specify where effort is mostly needed urgently and where effort will be needed along the line. And of course, doing all this is not easy. It's not something you start and we just get result and output immediately. It requires a gradual process and support. So we got support from leading practice when we need it, in terms of coaching us, guiding us on how to apply the reference content. And with this, we are able to really move this far in our transformation process. Thank you for attending this section, and goodbye for now.
Thank you, Paul. That was great. That was truly an impressive story of business transformation and gave us all insight on how to apply leading practices reference content. We appreciate you sharing your story with all of us today. I would also like to thank all the attendees on the webinar for spending their time with us today. This was the first webinar in a series covering case stories of outperformers, and it will be posted to our website if you'd like to view it again. And if this is your first introduction to leading practice, or would like to know more about us, or some of our upcoming training sessions, please reach out to me directly by visiting our website at leadingpractice.com.